Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We are learning Mishna Bava Kamma, Perikei, chapter 5, Mishna Vav, Mishna 6. So, let's read the Mishnah. Bar shal shnei shutfin. If you have a bar of two partners. Now, actually, we should start with an introduction. The Torah states that not only digging a pit, but merely uncovering a pit makes one obligated for any damage it causes. Follow that? Even if you didn't dig the hole, but if you uncover the hole, you are liable now for what that pit does. You didn't dig it, but you uncovered it. Okay? Now, our Mishnah starts with a case like this. Bar shel shnei shutfim. If a pit belongs to two partners. Okay? So, for example, two people owned a courtyard in which there was a pit. Now, they gave up their ownership of the courtyard, but kept the pit. Because remember, if, like we had yesterday, if it's a private area, what's the animal coming in there for? So the answer is they gave up the ownership on the area around the pit, but they held on to the ownership of the pit. So they were first partners in the courtyard, which made them partners also in the pit in the courtyard. They relinquished their ownership of the courtyard, which now it becomes part of the public domain so that the animal could be walking around there, but they retained the ownership of the pit. Now, the Mishnah reads like this. Avar alav harisha v'leikisahu. The first one passed by it. Now, the reading of the Mishnah is the first one passed by it and didn't cover it. So was it open already? What happened? So the explanation here is that the first one passed by it, uncovered it, because let's say he wanted to draw some water, and didn't cover it again. Vahasheni, and then the second one passed by, and although the Mishnah doesn't mention this, but you have to add to the case, and now the first one didn't cover it. Before he left, the second one passed by, and the first one gave the cover to the second. V'lo, but the second one did not cover it. You got the case? The first one uncovered. Before he left, the second owner, the second partner came by. He handed him the cover to cover it over. He didn't do so. What's the halacha now if, let's say, an animal falls in and gets damaged? Hasheni chayev. Only the second one is obligated to pay for any damage caused later by the pit. The second one must pay because he should have covered the pit. The first partner, though, does not have to pay because he fulfilled his responsibility by giving the cover to the second one. By giving the cover to the second partner, it is as though the first partner asked him to watch the pit. Therefore, if any accident happens, it is entirely the second one's fault. You get that? Since the second one, basically, he was given the responsibility now to take care of the pit by the first one when he handed him the cover, and he didn't do so, he's going to be liable. However, if both partners passed by their uncovered pit and left it uncovered, they're equally liable for the damage. Okay? So again, they both passed by, it was uncovered, they both uncovered it, they left it uncovered, they are equally liable because they are partners. They become only with the second partner, in our case of the Mishnah, becomes more liable than the other, becomes liable, and the other one doesn't, because the other one gave him the job of watching the pit, which he accepted when he accepted the cover from him. He didn't do so, and therefore he's going to be responsible. Now the Mishnah continues. That's the first case. Kisohu arishin. Let's say the first one covered it. He covered it. He covered it properly. Ubahashenu mitzay megula. And now the second one came afterwards and found it uncovered. How did he find it uncovered? So they explained that he found it uncovered because he found that it became wormy and it broke. Okay? The case cannot be, they say here in the notes, the case cannot be that a person uncovered it because that person would become entirely responsible for the pit, as the Gemara arrives from its source in the Torah. So the case here, when it says, the first one covered it, second one came and found it uncovered. Doesn't mean because somebody else uncovered it, because if somebody else uncovered it, that person becomes responsible. So the point is, how did he find it uncovered? Because he saw that it rotted. It rotted. It rotted away. Now, when the first, rotted away, and then he didn't cover it, Hasheni Chayiv, the second one is going to be responsible. he's going to be obligated to pay for any damage caused by the pit because he should have covered it, and he didn't do that. Meaning he saw it's his pit, he's responsible for the pit. The cover is broken. He has to cover it. What about the first person? The first partner, however, does not have to pay because he covered it properly. Although it later became wormy, that was an unlikely accident which he was not expected to foresee. Meaning, once he covered the pit properly, he's not required to constantly go back and check whether the cover is still strong. Now does that become wormy? He put on a good cover, right? The cover was a good cover. Now, as time goes on, these things can wear down and rot away. You're going to tell me he's responsible once he puts down the cover to constantly go back and check the cover? No, he puts down a good cover. It's not expected it's going to go bad. He doesn't have to go looking for it. Therefore, what he did was proper. He did what he had to do. And the second one who saw that I now bet rotted, he was not responsible to take care of it. And since he didn't, he's the one that's liable. If, however, as they bring down here from the Tosfos Yantiv, the first person did find out that the cover was weak, and had enough time to make a new one or hire someone to make a new one and cover the pit with it, both are obligated to pay for damage caused by the pit, since both knew that it was not covered properly and failed to fix it. So in our case, the first one put down a proper cover. But if the first one didn't put down a proper cover, or he himself found out that the cover was no good anymore, so he was responsible to take care of the cover. So was his partner who passed by and saw the cover was no good. He was also responsible to cover it, and he didn't do so. Both of them are now going to be obligated. In the Mishna, only one is obligated because the first partner covered it properly. Wasn't expected to have to go checking it and expect that it's going to go bad. Okay, next. Kisahu karoi. If a person covered the pit properly, nonetheless, an ox or donkey fell into it and died. Let's say, for example, again, over time, the cover became wormy. Again, something that he's not responsible to have to go checking, but it happened. And because of that, the animal fell in and died. Putter. The person who now covered it properly is not obligated to pay for any of the damages. Since he covered it properly, it was not expected that it was going to go wormy. But if it did not cover the pit properly, and an ox or a donkey fell into it and died, chayev, then he is obligated to pay. Understandably, because he didn't cover it properly. And an animal falls in, he is going to be liable for it. Okay, let's continue. Brand new case. Nafa lafanav mikala kriya, chayev. La'acharav mikala kriya pater. Here's the case. Person is digging a pit. In this case, right, it's not like the animal was walking and fell into this hole. What happened was the animal was not walking and because it walked into the hole. What happened was somebody was digging the hole, right? He's on the bottom of the hole, he's digging, and the banging of the sound of his digging frightened the animal. And because the animal was frightened, it lost its balance and it fell in. So we say like this. Nafa lefanav mikala kriya. That means it was near the pit and it fell forward into the pit because it was startled by the noise of the digging. Chayev. The owner of the pit is obligated to pay for the damage. Now, even though it was the noise rather than the pit that caused the animal to fall, the owner of the pit is liable because the damage occurred in his pit. Meaning his pit was not really the cause of it. They got frightened by the banging of the shovel. But since the damage happened in his pit, he's liable. Now that's if it fell forward. La'acharav mikala kriya. Let's say the animal fell backward onto the ground outside of the pit because it was startled by the noise of the digging. It fell forward into the pit. He got startled, fell back, and broke its neck and died. Okay, so anybody liable there? Is the owner of the pit liable? The answer is no. Putter, he's exempt. Why? Because the damage did not happen. Because the damage didn't happen inside his pit; it happened outside the pit. What about the guy who was digging? How about the guy who was digging and he frightened the animal, which caused the animal either to, in the other case it fell in, but either case, let's say in this case, he caused it to fall back, he frightened it, he made it fall back, and died. Is he liable? The answer is no. You know why? Because he's called a grumma. he is called indirect.
Yeah.
He didn't directly kill the animal. He was doing something. It frightened the animal. It made the animal fall. That's not called a direct damage, and therefore, since it's not a direct damage, it's indirect damage. He is not liable. Next, nafal l'saychay shar v'kelev nishtabru. Here we're talking about a regular case with a pit, and an animal fell in. Now the animal also had things that were on it. It had its gear, as they say here. It had its yoke and its plow. Fell, and that's what it had. It fell into the pit, and what happened? It fell into the pit, and everything got damaged. The animal got damaged. The gear got damaged. Or chamar v'kelev niskaru. Or let's say you have a donkey. Goes with its gear. It has a blanket under its saddle. There's a bundle of clothes it's carrying, and because it fell in, the garments became torn. The owner of the pit is liable to pay for the damage of the animal. Upatar ala kalim. But he is pater for the gear. He is pater for the utensils. He's pater on the things. You know why? Because you're not liable because the damage of a bar of a pit. When your pit is a cause for damage and it's your pit, you should be liable. The Torah exempts you from kalim. Utensils that fall into a pit and are broken, you're not liable. The Torah says for bar, you're not liable for that. You're only going to be liable for animals. Now, the Mishnah continues. Now let's say the animal that fell in was an ox. Not owned by somebody who is deaf, but rather it's a deaf ox, or it's a shaita, it's a foolish ox, or it's a young ox, which they explain here has not yet been trained to pull a plow. And that ox, before being trained, runs about wildly and does not avoid obstacles. That is when we say chayav. That is when we say that you are liable for the animal. That is when you're obligated to pay. Because why are you liable in this case? Because such animals do not take care to avoid pits. But he need not pay for damage done to a normal animal. Listen to this. Since a normal animal looks where it is going and tries to keep away from pits, its falling into the pit is an unexpected occurrence for which the owner of the pit is not responsible. Isn't that amazing? That's very surprising. You know, you wouldn't expect that. We talk about the pit, the animal in the pit. Yeah. It's not talking about a regular animal. A regular animal knows not to go into pits. If it's young and it's wild, that's a different story. Yeah. But if it's an animal, if it's a regular animal, let's say, and we'll see a little bit more about this in a second, it's able to avoid obstacles. You're not obligated for that. You're only obligated for the animal that can avoid obstacles. Now, let me read to you here. This ruling applies only where the pit is open, in which case a normal ox would see the pit and walk around it. If, however, it is covered, but the cover is not strong enough to prevent an ox from falling in, an ox cannot be expected to see the danger. Therefore, if an ox stepped on the cover and fell into the pit, the owner of the pit must pay damages. You got that? Meaning, a hole you can expect it not to go into, but it's covered and but it's a weak cover, that you can expect it to, doesn't feel the cover before it walks onto it. That you will also be a situation where you're going to be responsible. Okay. Now, only animals. This is going to relate to the next part of the Mishnah. You know what? There's a lot more here to talk about. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to stop here. We'll finish up tomorrow.
Okay.
All right. So we're up to this part. We'll go back to this part about the animal. And things and this last part of the mission about the animal falling in. Okay, have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
For you.